Everyone, I'm Dana Perino along with Kennedy, Juan Williams, Jesse Waters, and Greg Gutfeld. It's 5 o'clock in New York City, and this is The Five. A breakaway group of migrants from the caravan moving through Guatemala has reportedly reached the border with Mexico. This comes just hours after President Trump threatened to send in the military to secure the border if the migrants aren't stopped. The president blaming Democrats for the new crisis on Twitter, claiming their support of weak immigration laws is making the situation worse. Meanwhile, Nancy Pelosi is putting her foot down, saying her party isn't planning on working with President Trump. Oh, she says, I'm sorry, I don't see any of us voting for wall funding. We have a responsibility to secure our borders. There are ways to do that that are consistent with civilization, humanitarianism, and who we are as a nation. We have to remove all doubt about that. And with only 19 days to go until the midterms, a new Fox News poll shows what's extremely important to voters. 46% say it's immigration. I just want to show this other poll, the Fox News poll with vote preference among those saying that border security is extremely important. The Republican candidate at 58%, the Democratic candidate at 35%. And with this new caravan, Jesse, moving its way north 19 days before the election, not good timing for Democrats.
No, I mean, it really, visually, it has a big impact on voters when they see this. It's not a theoretical problem. And it's just not this one caravan we're talking about. I mean, in terms of size, caravans like this are coming across the border all day, every day, and there's really not a lot we can do about it because a lot of these loopholes are baked into our immigration and asylum system. I mean, it used to be adult male Mexicans crossing the border, and now it's mostly families and teenagers from Guatemala and from Honduras, and we can't turn them back.
The Mexicans you could.
The Mexicans you could, but you have to bring in and take, when you apprehend them, into the rest of the country, and they're all claiming credible fear. Now, credible fear, that excuse has spiked over the last couple of years, yet when they use it, the economy in Honduras is going up, yet crime in Honduras is going down. So it makes me believe that these people are being coached. And you're hearing things like NGOs sending activists and lawyers down to Central American countries, and they're helping them with the caravan. They're coaching them what to say when they get to the border. And it's interesting, where do they get the cameras from? You know, we're hearing a lot of these NGOs are bringing these camera crews in. Then all of a sudden the people get off the van. They walk when the camera crews come out. The camera crews stop recording. Then they hop back in the van. Then once they get to Mexico, they pay the drug cartels and the smugglers $5,000 per family unit to get them across. The drug cartels are the only ones making any money in this process. The drug cartels and the open border Democrats, they are on the same side. These drug cartels have made $2.5 billion in smuggling alone per year. That's on top of the drug profits, and that's a lot of money. So we have to change the immigration laws so that you treat people that cross the border, if you're from Central America, the same way you do it as you're from Canada and Mexico.
And Kennedy, the other thing is in these caravans, what the Department of Homeland Security is reporting, that the number of sexual assaults happening along this route, and not just in the caravan, as Jesse was saying, about 1,600 migrants try to cross the border a day. They're finding repeated incidents of sexual assault for children even. I mean, this is happening across the board.
Yeah, that's horrible. I mean, we saw some of that, unfortunately, in the shelters in the aftermath of Hurricane Florence. And it's, you know, an unfortunate aspect of human nature. And, you know, we have to find a way to let really good people into the country and keep really bad people like that out of the country. The government hasn't sufficiently done that. And I think part of this rests on Congress because we've got a very confusing immigration system. And Democrats and Republicans, I'm convinced this is the one issue where they will never work together. But it's interesting because they have a president who actually, even though he's a hardliner rhetorically on immigration, I think there's a lot that he would give to Democrats in order to come up with a compromise. And I don't think you would see that with the Obama administration and Republicans in the same way, or with past Republican administrations. So they need to fix that. And if you think about the kind of people you want to have in this country, you want people who are hardworking, people who are ethical, people who look out for their families and their communities, and people who are very physically strong. So I think we need to set up an American Ninja Warrior obstacle course at the border, and whoever can make it, you can't fake it, they get through.
The other thing is that
fair and balanced.
The United States is trying to help those countries with aid, also helping in the criminal justice system. Crime actually going down in Honduras and Guatemala, and yet the caravan still comes.
Well, I think it's economic problems that lead families to decide that their best prospect is to come toward the United States. And as we know, their economies have been suffering. So I think that's the principal reason. But I'm interested in this as a political ploy by Republicans because clearly immigration's not a big issue in this campaign. According to the polls, only like 7% of people say it's a big issue. The number one issue is health care. And, you know, but beyond
according
that,
to the poll that Dana just showed, it was number 4 on the list.
no, that's among extreme people who are extremely
Everyone's
concerned.
extreme, though.
Okay. So it's not, the big issue is health care. And then you start looking and, you know, the secondary issue is reining in President Trump. And the third one is people who want Democrats to control the House of Representatives. Those are the big issues.
But what about this issue in particular, though? Because we have time to talk about those other issues today. But what about Nancy Pelosi saying that they won't work with President Trump? It's really, to me, is not a right-left issue. This is the fact that you have a humanitarian crisis with children being sent to the hospital as they have to stop at these way stations. They're dehydrated. Some have been victims of sexual assault. If they get here, well, it's not true.
I said not good.
Oh, no, it's not good. So why would Nancy Pelosi already be signaling that they won't do anything to help?
No, she's talking about the wall.
I need to push back on you a little bit on something. But this is an important correction because it wasn't extreme voters. It was actually a poll of likely voters.
No, people who are extremely concerned.
It is vote preference among those who say that border security is most important. They would prefer the Republicans.
That's what I said. Okay, so what I think you have to understand is that Nancy Pelosi's talking about the wall, Dana, and about the president's persistence. I think yesterday, remember, we quoted her saying it was a manhood issue for him. It's a political issue. He sees it as a promise he made to his base that he wants to deliver for his base. But if you go back in time, remember going back to President Bush, going back to President Obama, you had Republicans and Democrats working on the immigration issue, working on border security. But Trump has made it all about the wall. And what Nancy Pelosi is saying, hey, this is not about the wall. It's not a good expense of money or time. And certainly not to be mean to people.
Let's get Greg in here because one of the things Nancy Pelosi says, and you hear this from Democrats a lot, is this is not who we are as a nation.
Yeah, it's a cop-out. It's actually disgusting. What happened to the Democratic Party? As Juan said, Bill Clinton, President Obama understood that border security helps define a country. And like it or not, the wall is actually part of border security. How could it not be? We have fences. We have a president that's interested in putting out a wall. Putting up a wall? Again, like I said before, if you're on safari and you're being chased by a rhino, you hop into the first truck you see. You don't wait for the fourth truck. So there's a huge dishonesty going on with the media here when they willfully ignore the land between Honduras and Guatemala and the United States. Imagine how many lives would be saved and how many rapes would be prevented if they actually were able to stop once they leave their country and lay claim to some land there rather than having to risk their lives making it to our border. That is a huge hypocrisy that somehow we're encouraging people to make this terrible, terrible journey for some kind of political optics. And I hate using the word optics. Lastly, to your point, where is the Me Too movement? Like if you are putting women in danger for this issue, where are you? How can you allow this to happen? That's actually pretty disgusting.
Well, but you raise a really good point about Mexico. And that's one of the things, if you take some of the hyperbole and rhetoric out of it and you look at what the president is saying, he's appealing to Mexico, aside from threatening to shut down the southern border, but they do have some responsibility here, and they do open up both borders in order to send people further north. So if it is a humanitarian issue, and Mexico is a humanitarian country with people who care very much about their friends and neighbors to the north and south, then why don't they have better systems in place to absorb some of the refugees?
The other lie is that economic problems make your life, puts your life in threat. It's like, no. It's like you stay in the country and deal with these economic problems.
Well, you know what? We have a history in America of people from Cuba getting on the high seas, risking their lives. We have people, remember during World War II.
Country. Wherever there's leftism, that's where people are in danger.
Well, all I'm saying is there's a history of people putting themselves at great risk in order to reach our shores because they believe in America. They like the financial
something in between here and there.
No, but I'm saying it's not. Believe me, we have a better, stronger economy than Mexico.
But one thing is,
so you now have a menu of options you can choose.
No, I'm telling you that's what families are focused on. I think they're really really focused on their children, Greg. They want to create the greatest opportunity.
I want to go back to something Jesse said for a last word, and that is that the drug cartels. Apparently, there's not a single person that has come across the border that hasn't had to pay some sort of money as a family or as an individual to the drug cartels, and perhaps there's something there that you could find a bipartisan agreement on, figure out a way to target those drug cartels, those leaders and their finances, and shut them down.
I mean, they're making fistfuls of cash every day from these smuggling operations on top of the profits they're making from heroin, cocaine, and marijuana. And the Democrats have to understand the position they're in by having open borders policies only empowers the drug cartels. It empowers no one else,
right.
Only the drug cartels. And I'm happy that Juan would admit that the Trump economy is so strong, people are risking their lives to come to America to get a piece of the pie.
I said the American economy.
Oh, okay. All right.
And by the way, I don't understand what you just said. I don't get it. You act as if there's nothing here that would attract people.
I think a wall would prevent the drug cartels from profiting so immensely from smuggling.
All right, we got to run because we got lots of other stuff to talk about. President Trump commenting on what he thinks happened to the Washington Post columnist and what his critics are saying next.
To me, it's very sad. Certainly looks that way.
Mr. President, what are you considering for possible consequences for Saudi based on those?
Well, it'll have to be very severe. I mean, it's bad stuff. But we'll see what happens. Okay?
New reaction from President Trump on the disappearance and suspected murder of a Washington Post columnist. Critics arguing the president is not doing enough. Former CIA Director John Brennan claims Trump and the Saudis are now colluding in a cover-up.
All right.
Their challenge is that they don't know the full extent of what the U.S. intelligence agencies and the Turks know. So I'm sure that they've been working to try to concoct a story that's going to stand up to the scrutiny that will be immediately put on it.
Joe Biden and some in the media also going after President Trump.
I got something to say about that.
I'm very worried that the president seems to have a love affair with autocrats.
The president is completely in the pocket of any other dictators in the world because he admires their ability to basically kill or tacitly allow the death of anybody who criticizes them. I don't think the president ever got on the phone with anybody in Saudi Arabia. I don't think he read any sort of, NSA analysis to come to that decision. He basically said, I don't care. It was a brown journalist.
Wow. Jesse, where are you on this story? Because the president said, after meeting with Secretary of State Pompeo, we have to give the Saudis a few days. But now, in that last bite that we just saw, it sounds like he's saying something's going on and the journalist is definitely dead.
Yeah, I think the journalist is definitely dead. And it looks like this was a barbaric act. I mean, they use a bone saw and acid to dissolve the guy. So they have to pay a price. With that said, though, I mean, we do business with a lot of unsavory characters around the world. It's best when they not throw it in our face and remind the whole world of that. But at the same time, I wouldn't be canceling the arms deal, and I don't think we destroy an alliance over that. We'll come up with some sort of sanctions or repercussions in order for them to understand this is not allowed in a civilized society. But as a news story, this is not having any impact on voters. People really don't understand the story or care about it that much. And the Democrats and the media are complete hypocrites trying to score points off this. If this guy wasn't a journalist that had been killed, I don't even think the media would be covering this story. I remember how many people died in Syria that were gassed by Assad. Obama didn't even lift a finger after all those people were heinously killed. I mean, come on. And then you look at the other Democrats saying, oh, well, we have to do something about Saudi Arabia. We have to pull out of this, pull out of that. Is Hillary Clinton going to give back the $25 million the Saudi royal family gave her foundation? I don't think so. What this is about, the Democrats don't like Saudi politics because it's all about oil. They've always tried to peel this country away from Saudi Arabia for energy issues. And right now, whatever the president does, if he embraces an ally like he's doing now, he's criticized. If he antagonizes an ally like he's done in the past, he's criticized. He can never win.
All right, so Kennedy, a lot of people are saying this is about money and not...
It's always about money with the Saudis.
Okay, and the Saudis just sent $100 million fulfilling a pledge they said that they would help the U.S. in terms of our efforts in Syria. The timing, a little suspect.
Yeah, it is a little suspect. I don't trust Saudi Arabia, and I think there are other countries in the Middle East where we are better aligned. I think you're absolutely right about Hillary Clinton, and she would have done the exact same thing. And this political cronyism goes back so many administrations, further back than her husband's. And American presidents have always protected this kingdom for one reason or another, and the world is going to look very different when we're no longer reliant on oil. And I wish we were more self-reliant when it comes to our energy reserves, but you have environmentalists in this country who are they're very torn and hypocritical when it comes to who we accept energy from. We still need energy, we still need oil. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully we will use American brain power in order to wean ourselves off of that, because it has made horrific strategic partnerships.
Dana, where are you on this one?
Well, I want to talk about what Brennan said about the president. I think it's unfair, because if you go back to the Obama administration, I don't think they would have handled it any differently. I don't know if they would have handled it better. Do I think that immediately President Obama would have sent John Kerry, without even picking up a suitcase, directly to Saudi Arabia? And when he gets back from 3 days, he comes back. What's the first thing that happens? Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, meets with the president and Secretary Pompeo, and he pulls out of the Saudi conference. It's prudent, it's measured, and then you just heard the president say there's going to have to be something severe that happens. So why don't you give him like half a second to try to deal with this? You remember when the Congress passed a bill that would have allowed the 9/11 victims' families to sue Saudi Arabia and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed,
right,
and President Obama vetoed that bill? There wasn't a lot of complaining in the media at the time about that kind of action. But I do think that the Saudis are reckless and impulsive. You have an American green card holder, which, there are 18,000 of them serving in our U.S. military. Like, you cannot do this. We turn a blind eye to Saudi. We do not give them a lot of grief for a lot of things. Human rights violations, the way they treat women, the punishment that they use, how they treat their guest workers. And we need them as an ally in the region, but we are not idiots. We understand what's going on. I think the president's very clear-eyed about that. And one of the things that is important is sending a signal that it's unacceptable. Some of the things that might happen, we won't be able to see. Okay, like for these really rich Saudi people that might be involved somehow, that want to travel over the United States, make it a little hard for them to do so. We don't need to know all of the things the administration is doing, but we should trust them.
So, Greg, I mean, what strikes me is obviously, I think, the grisly details about what they did to this guy. I mean, it's just horrific. And secondly, picking up on what Dana was just saying, the Saudis, they're principally involved in 9/11. And we never, ever said, hey, look, you guys, you have to bear responsibility.
Well, I love that now the left cares. We've been talking about the abuse of gays, the abuse of women, the spread of radical Islam and the consequences from that, including terrorism. But it wasn't such a big deal for the left because you couldn't blame it on the West. So here you have the death of a journalist, and they're scrambling. They see this, we can peg this on Trump. They don't care about the journalist. They don't care how he died. They're just looking at it as an opportunity to tie to Trump, because they certainly didn't care about all the injustices that you've listed about Saudi Arabia. I mean, they've done some horrible things. And also, to your point, for the better part of a decade, we've discussed the importance of being energy independent. We've done many segments on the phenomenal success of shale. We talk about that. The people who are against shale, against fracking, are the same people right now screaming about the Saudis. The whole point of shale, the whole point of fracking is so we aren't relying on psychopaths in the Middle East. Right. But now the left has protected the psychopaths because they don't want us to do fracking. They don't want the shale. So there's a lot of hypocrisy going around, a lot of stupidity.
Can I make one last point on the arms deal? So it is about money, okay, right? So we get the money and the jobs, but it's about something else. If a country is buying arms from us, that means they're dependent on us for parts, for all the other things that go along with it. So we get a benefit out of that because that means we are the dominant player in the region. Do we want someone like Saudi Arabia to buy weapons from China or Russia and become dependent on them rather than on us? No. That would be foolish.
Well, I agree, but I just do think that we have some standing in terms of our morals, and we don't go around.
I agree with you
that
they need us more than we need them, and we need to behave accordingly.
All right. A debate raging over calling protesters mobs. That's ahead right here on The Five.
Remember Brooke Baldwin's brave moment when she faced down a lone voice in defense of the mob? It was like a reverse David and Goliath.
When you see people like Ted Cruz getting chased out of restaurants by a mob.
Oh, you're not going to use the mob word
Oh,
here.
it's totally a mob. It is without a doubt. There's no other word for it. It's a go watch. Put up the video.
Mob. Stop.
Tuesday, Baldwin played a home game on Colbert's set, defending her effort to ban the M word to describe groups of unruly, intimidating people targeting one person. Sorry, I mean a mob.
So when he brought the mob word up again, I called him out. And listen, like, I don't want to be the word police, and that was not my intention, but I also believe in calling out talking points, and to hear him bring that up, I had to say something.
Get that? Any opinion Baldwin doesn't like is a talking point. I wonder if Media Matters told her to say that. But it's funny, she says that calling out a mob is somehow groupthink. Think about it. When you try to defend someone from a large angry group, you're really just a sheep. Reminds me of the other M word, moronic. And Brooke Baldwin isn't even related to Alec. Sorry, it's not woke to portray a mob as protesters. When you offer excuses for harassment, you become its defender at airports, restaurants, campuses, the streets, online. But if you've never said anything that stood you apart from the crowd, how would you even know? And before you cite right-wing anomalies, that's merely fringe. For the left, it's now mainstream. There's a new one or two every day. Like the professor telling people to contaminate or steal the food of Republicans at restaurants. Just another miscreant inciting mob action built upon previous incitements by leftist leaders, celebs, and activists. I guess that's a protest too. I guess if the target's on the right, they had it coming. And anything else is a talking point. You know, Jesse, everybody has talking points.
Yeah.
But it seems to me CNN had a talking point, like on every show. If you said mob, they were told you can't say that. So it sounds to me like she was projecting.
Yeah, the word mob is not a talking point. If I were to go on her show and I were to say Trump is running on jobs and the Democrats are running on mobs, that would be a talking point. And it would be a good talking point, and she could call me out, and I'd actually then prove her wrong with my facts. I don't mind Brooke Baldwin. I think she has a compelling show, although Dana beat her last night by 700,000 homes, doubled her audience overall. I looked at the ratings. You did. Congratulations. And Brooke does beat MSNBC, but that's not that hard. She just has to be honest about who she is. She's acting like she's an umpire calling balls and strikes. She's not. She's an advocate for the Democratic Party, and she's playing word games to defend the DNC.
She's Enrico Palazzo.
She is. And the Democrats, Kennedy, ban words all the time. Merry Christmas. Pocahontas, illegal alien, radical Islam. They love doing that. Remember the CNN promo that they just ran?
Yes.
This is an apple. Some people won't tell you it's an apple. They'll say it's a banana. They're looking at a mob and telling you it's a banana.
If only mobs had that much potassium. It's really sad. My brother, who was in law enforcement for a long time, keeps sending me videos of the protesters in Portland and how they're torturing and terrorizing people there. It's not okay. It means that you have given up on ideas. It means that there is an intellectual reversion in this country. We're reverting back to essentially people without rational brains and cerebral cortices. We are turning into people who use emojis instead of words, which are essentially hieroglyphics. And it's funny because although that was it's funny because people think that this is a winning strategy and winning optics. But if you look at what's happening with the caravan and the visual you get from that, and if you look at what's happening with the mob, you got to be kind of careful because there are people who are secretly voting going, well, that stuff scares the living banana out of me.
Dana?
I don't let people do talking points on my show.
That's true.
I don't invite people on to do talking points. Just kidding. Here's the thing. Matt Lewis is who she was talking to. He is not actually working for any candidate or a party, so he doesn't have to do anybody's talking points.
He's an independent thinker.
Yes, he has a great podcast. He's a good writer. He's conservative. So I just think that it's one thing that if you had somebody who was on who was like a spokesperson for a group, then they usually give you talking points. Somebody like Matt Lewis is one of their analysts.
I see, Juan, the difference is that a mob is, about intimidation. Protesters are about dialogue. That's the difference. And a lot of those people aren't interested in hearing anybody else.
Well, I think you have two things here. One is that you said there's a difference between the fringe and the mainstream. I think that, in fact, When I think of Charlottesville, I think of a mob. That's a violent mob. When I think of people like those in Portland that you were talking about, I think of these sometimes are people who are homeless, who are involved with drugs, and they pick up on this because they see it as an opportunity to act out, in my opinion. But I don't see it as part of the mob. But I must say, I think the right has plugged into that word as a vehicle for saying to their voters, hey, we're facing bad guys, a mob out there. And I think that's what Brooke Baldwin was doing. She was saying, hey, don't just use that word helter-skelter because it fits the Republican talking points for the midterm elections. If you see a mob, call it a mob. But what he was talking about, there were people who were harassing somebody in a restaurant.
But you have Democrats who are calling for mobs.
What do you mean?
That's a problem with the political discourse right now. You've got people like Cory Booker and Maxine Waters and the professor at Ole Miss, which is a great school.
It is. I miss Ole Miss.
From Ole Miss.
We've got to go because we have Fast as 7. And I'm trying to help the producers here for once. Another Hollywood celebrity claiming Disney movies like Snow White are bad for kids. That's sex.
Baby D. All right, get ready for our brand new segment, the PC Police. First, Keira Knightley banned her daughter from watching Cinderella. Wow, what an authoritarian. And now Kristen Bell is blasting another classic Disney fairy tale over this scene. Isn't that a sweet moment? Apparently not. The actress is concerned that the prince kissing Snow White without her consent sends a bad message to her young daughters. Like that's true. Jesse, you have young daughters, and I've been thinking about this, and I now share her outrage, and I've been looking back at some of the other Disney films that I've shared with my daughters, and I look at The Princess and the Frog, and I think to myself, here is a human woman kissing a reptile. That's bestiality, and don't get me started with Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, I found the dwarves offensive in that scene. I mean, that's politically incorrect in my opinion.
How do you think I feel?
I also think, listen, there's room for romance and the Me Too movement. I mean, there's plenty of room for both. Romance shouldn't be a casualty of the Me Too movement. And I have twin girls, and, you know, we showed them all types of movies. And one of them is a pretty girly girl, and she loves pink and princesses and beauty and fashion. And the other likes sports and building things and, you know, wears Adidas track pants. So, and then I know another young girl that was obsessed with dolls. All she wanted was a doll and play with princesses her whole life. And her mother kind of steered her away from that because she didn't want to play into gender stereotypes. And it actually, the course correction had a negative effect. And now she's desperate for dolls and girls, and it's a little too much. So there's other things you can show them. There's a movie called Brave that stars Meridia. And Meridia has a bow and arrow, and she's pretty. She's the star. You don't always have to go so crazy. Let kids be normal, and they'll figure it out.
Or, you know, maybe let them find what they want. It's funny because Keira Knightley doesn't let her daughter watch Cinderella because her big takeaway from it is a man saves Cinderella, when actually it's a movie about anti-bullying and a young woman who defeats the worst bullies in her life with kindness.
And then the other thing is, if Kristen Bell's worried about Snow White, you would think the scene she would have picked would have been the one where it's mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all, because of people getting upset and worried about how they compare to other people, and if they're pretty enough, they're beautiful enough. So I would have picked that scene if I were going to ban my daughter from watching, but I don't have children, so I would defer to you and Jesse because those were very good points.
Oh, Greg.
Everybody's trying to out-woke each other, right? And what they're doing is they're actually undermining probably one of the most unifying things in the world that crosses all cultures, which is fairy tales. If you look at Russian literature, if you look at Japanese literature, African, it's filled with stories of love and sorrow and warriors and princesses. You can't stop these stories from actually happening. And I guess you can't kiss your children when they're asleep. You can't kiss your spouses when you're asleep because that's without consent. I would also add that, you know, her husband has done a lot of things without consent on a show called Punk'd, where he actually used to walk around naked and as part of a prank. And I would say that is probably maybe worse than kissing somebody who's asleep.
Well, certainly. I mean, forcing that sort of a visual on unsuspecting people, especially when it's unwanted, that is not okay in this day and age.
I agree.
But there's something to be said, you know, not only for fantasies and fairy tales, but the entire genre, superhero movies.
Yeah, in fact, there are
The Hobbit.
There are more superhero movies now that feature girls as the hero, as the protagonist, and I think it's great. I mean, I got granddaughters. I hope they see it. You know, so I was paying attention because I think the kind of cultural stereotypes about, for example, Beauty and the Beast, that the girl has to tolerate the beast and she has to help the beast out, and then the beast becomes the good guy. You think this is fun? It's
also true.
What do you mean?
It's true. That's what women, they make men better creatures.
Yeah, but the thing is then the onus is on her to be nice to save him.
Women like to improve men.
Well, it's on her to not
it's a fact. Until they can't improve them, then you're out the door.
Or, you know, it's a commercial for Stockholm Syndrome, which is also incredibly problematic.
I just think, so you guys are right, by the way, on PC. I mean, I think if you have a story, fine. But I just think, you know, we do put girls into a lot of stereotypical positions.
We do the same thing with boys.
Like what?
Boys have to be rough and tumble. They're always the criminals. You know, come on. It goes both ways. The fact is, there are biological roles that happen because we're different.
Yeah. Juan, you held up a pink dress outside my office today in the wardrobe department.
Yes.
You were experimenting.
I was?
Don't lie.
I was experimenting with you to see.
Okay.
I didn't know if you would, you know.
Sensitivity training really helped. Right. The left now using witches. That's real. To resist Brett Kavanaugh. That and more spellbinding stories in the Fastest 7 up next.
Some quick headlines to get to. Another building is stripping Trump off its entrance. New York condo owners voting to remove the president's name from a building he owns. It'll cost about $23,000. 3 other buildings already removed his name, citing security concerns and dropping resale value. And a professor who offered college credit to anti-Kavanaugh protesters is out of a job.
Kavanaugh has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho. Kavanaugh has got to go. Hey, hey. Ho, ho.
The University of Southern Maine banning Susan Feiner from teaching, saying she never got approval for her one credit course that bused students to D.C. The school's president is now apologizing. Guys?
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carly. Well, this morning, President Trump is set to be briefed by Mike Pompeo on what he learned about the seemingly gruesome death of that person right there, the Washington Post columnist in Saudi Arabia.
Mr. Khashoggi, our next guest claims there is something the United States can do to make sure people are held accountable. Here to explain, Fox News senior judicial analyst Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, Khashoggi was not an American citizen. He was a resident, and you say the U.S. government could go kidnap the guys they suspect of having done this.
And bring them here and prosecute them. So the murder of an American citizen or a person lawfully resident in the United States, when the murder occurs in another country, is a federal crime here. And in the Reagan administration, when this happened, President Reagan dispatched agents, intelligence as well as FBI, to kidnap an individual and bring him here. But he said to the judge, look, I was kidnapped. The judge said, I don't care how you got here. Yeah. You're here. Here's an indictment. We're going to try the case. If you think these guys kidnapped you, sue them. Judge, so it can happen.
Judge, this is so gruesome when you read the details, and they're too gory to talk about this morning because people are eating their breakfast. But this guy, he lives in Virginia, has a house in Virginia, 4 kids. 3 of his kids were born here in the United States. What does the president need to do? Because he's stuck. I mean, he doesn't want to jeopardize
The president has a lot of factors to balance. You know, Saudi Arabia is the linchpin, along with Israel, of our foreign policy in that part of the world. Saudi Arabia, of course, has enormous investments in the United States, in Turkey, and in other places that we want to see flourish economically. But the president has to put this fire out. The behavior is so morally repellent, so totally and universally, except perhaps in Saudi Arabia government, unacceptable that he has to do something. Our friend, whom we've known and interviewed for years, Senator Graham, Lindsey Graham, is saying, we got to persuade them through intelligence sources to get rid of the prince and replace him with one of his older, more mature brothers, of which he has 13.
The go sign throughout the Middle East to say it's okay to start cutting up journalists around the Middle East if we let this go unconfronted.
I think the president,
in fact, Jonathan Swan reported this, that Mike Pompeo says a source told him that Pompeo told MBS Prince, in very direct language that there isn't some endless timeline here in terms of investigation. They need to get this investigation done quickly. Turkey has the tapes. There's nothing to be done.
Let me tell you that what the rumors are inside the Beltway, that the intelligence sources are suggesting another prince replace him, and they're checking boxes on his background. I don't want to tell you who
sure
this
he's
person.
clean.
Right. Financial background, check. Intelligence background, check. Managerial background, check. More mature and not as reckless as the present crown
Would
prince.
would there be a trial in Saudi Arabia against the crown prince?
No. I can't imagine that the king
Some people have said
would
the
allow
prince,
that
though, was
to
a
happen.
reformer. He's like in his early 30s. I think he's 32, 34, and a lot of people like what he's doing over there.
He
except the murder part kind of
right.
clouds that resume.
There's reform and there's reform. He kidnapped wealthy Saudis and had them beaten to within an inch of their lives until they turned billions in assets over to the government. What kind of reform is that?
They go to other countries killing people they don't like. Not good.
How can we trust these audio tapes and that's from Turkey?
Well, that's what the American intelligence community has to do. I believe the audio tapes have been verified, and the American intelligence community has done so and summarized it for the president. The Secretary of State will enhance what those tapes tell by giving him more.
Okay, now the move is probably up to the president. We'll see what happens.
Yes.
Judge, thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure, guys.
Meanwhile, listen to this. Something you may not have heard about yet. A rare and mysterious illness that paralyzes children is spreading across the country. 100 children in more than 22 states so far. Dr. Mark Siegel is here with what parents need to know on this Thursday morning.
A mysterious, paralyzing illness is sickening children in 22 states.
All right, it's been likened to polio, and so far there's no known cause or cure.
Here with what you need to know, Fox News medical correspondent Dr. Mark Siegel. Dr. Siegel, it's abbreviated AFM. The good news is it's not contagious.
Acute flaccid myelitis. It's scary stuff. It's a lot like polio, almost identical to polio. We haven't seen a case in polio here since 1979, so you can have an idea what that's like. It's not contagious, which is the good news. It's probably based on a virus, guys, because it occurs late in the summer and early fall like viruses do.
Like right now.
Right. In 2014, Centers for Disease Control actually put it together with a virus called enterovirus, which is what polio is. It's that kind of a virus. This year, they're totally puzzled. What they have told me, and they told me this yesterday, it doesn't look like it's an effective vaccine. So everyone out there should be reassured. It's not vaccinating your children that's causing this. That's extremely important. It's not polio. It's not West Nile virus. If it's associated with a virus, they haven't proven it yet.
What happens to these kids? Their arms, their legs, they're totally paralyzed for the rest of their lives?
It's a really good question, Ainsley. What happens is you get really weak, and you may end up in a wheelchair. It's really tragic. You know, your muscles get very flaccid, and you can't walk in severe cases. Rehabilitation helps. Early physical therapy helps. Some people think steroids help. Not been proven. You can get better, like with polio. It's rare, though, and the bigger virus here than even this is fear. Because people worry. They hear 386 cases over 4 years. They think, I'm going to be next. It's still only 1 in a million.
But you guys got to start working on this. Symptoms of AFM, you just posted them up there, but one of which is slurred speech. So your kid comes back, he's slurring his speech, he or she is slurring his speech. That's an interesting thing. And difficulty swallowing.
Yeah, so you start with problems like you're congested, you can have problems swallowing, you can have problems with your face, and then suddenly you get this weakness in upper and lower extremities. And it progresses very, very quickly. So parents should be on the lookout. Really nothing you can do to prevent this, though.
So the news is, if any parents watching right now, they notice those symptoms in their children, take them to the doctor immediately.
Really, right away. And also, no, it doesn't mean other people in your household are going to get it. That's not what's happening. We're seeing clusters across 22 states, but it's not contagious person to person. So I wouldn't be afraid because you know someone that has it.
Washing your hands help if it's
Well,
a
washing
virus?
hands helps with any virus, so that's always a good idea.
Coming into cold and flu season.
Yeah, so this is a good time to be talking about this, but it's not like washing your hands is the key here. The key here is for the Centers for Disease Control to figure out exactly which virus this is, and they definitely can develop vaccines to these.
And Dr. Siegel, with healthcare being the #1 issue for most Americans at the midterms, we know that you'll be back soon. Okay.
I think it's a big deal. And yes, the Republicans do believe in covering pre-existing conditions. That's a myth. We got to get rid of that.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Siegel. Meanwhile, 3 minutes before the top of the hour, outrage over Louis Farrakhan's latest message of hate.
Call me an anti-Semite. Stop it. I'm anti-termite.
Will Democrats ever denounce this kind of hate speech? Will Twitter take his posts down?
Alan Dershowitz will react to that. He's here along with Sarah Carter, Eric Trump, and Dana Lash in the next 2 hours of Fox and Friends.
Good-looking group.
A mysterious, paralyzing illness is sickening children in 22 states.
All right, it's been likened to polio, and so far there's no known cause or cure.
Here with what you need to know, Fox News medical correspondent Dr. Mark Siegel. Dr. Siegel, it's abbreviated AFM. The good news is it's not contagious.
Acute flaccid myelitis. It's scary stuff. It's a lot like polio, almost identical to polio. We have